Hi, my name is Alyssa, and this is Medicine, where learning is always in style. Today we'll be talking about basic heart physiology. By the end of this video, you will have a basic introduction on the following topics: blood flow through the heart, electrical conduction of the heart, and sounds of the heart. Before we start, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, follow our Instagram at MedizineStyle for more content on life as a med student and study review. Okay, let's start with basic anatomy and blood flow. The heart is responsible for receiving deoxygenated blood from the venous system and pumping out oxygenated blood to the body's organs. It does this via direct connections with the lungs. The heart has four chambers, like rooms in a house: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. Deoxygenated blood from the body flows into the heart from the superior and inferior vena cava, or SVC and IVC. This blood is dumped into the right atrium. When the tricuspid valve opens, the blood from the right atrium flows into the right ventricle. Once the blood is in the right ventricle, it flows through the open pulmonic valve into the pulmonary artery. Deoxygenated blood is received by the lungs to become oxygenated, and oxygenated blood leaves the lungs and enters the heart via the pulmonary veins. This blood enters the left atrium and flows through the open mitral valve into the left ventricle. Blood from the left ventricle is pumped with incredible force through the open aortic valve and through the aorta to deliver oxygenated blood to all the body's organs. Let's focus on these four valves for a minute. Each of the heart's chambers are like rooms in a house, like I just said, and each of the different rooms are separated by doors. In the heart, these doors are called valves. Valves make sure that the blood flow through the heart is unidirectional. When the tricuspid and mitral valves open, blood moves from the atria to the ventricles. When the blood is pumped from the ventricles out of the heart, the tricuspid and mitral valves close, and the aortic and pulmonic valves open. This ensures that blood is only moving in the forward direction through the heart, not backwards. The opening and closing of each of these valves is controlled by the papillary muscles. What's so cool about the heart valves is that we can actually assess their function just by listening. Doctors use a stethoscope to auscultate or listen to the different heart sounds. A stethoscope has two parts: a diaphragm to hear high-pitched sounds and a bell to hear low-pitched sounds. The different sounds of the heart correspond to the movements of the heart. In a normal heart, these specifically correspond to the closure of the heart valves. Since there are four heart valves, we will auscultate the precordium in four different regions, one for each valve. The aortic region is on the upper right sternal border in the second intercostal space. The pulmonic region is in the upper left sternal border in the second intercostal space. The tricuspid region is on the left lower sternal border in the fourth or fifth intercostal space. And the mitral region is along the midclavicular line in the fifth intercostal space. You can remember this as apartments, APTM. When you auscultate a person's heart, the normal expected sounds are lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. The lub is called S1, and the dub is called S2. The silence between S1 and S2 corresponds to systole, when the ventricles actively contract. The longer silence between S2 and S1 corresponds with diastole, when the ventricles are relaxed and filling with blood. This means that S1 corresponds with the closure of the mitral and tricuspid valves, and S2 corresponds with the closure of the pulmonic and aortic valves. By extension, the tricuspid and mitral valves are open during diastole to allow the ventricle to fill, while the pulmonic and aortic valves are open during systole to allow ejection of blood from the ventricles to the arteries. This basic physiology will help us understand pathological murmurs, but let's just focus on normal for now. S1 means the mitral and tricuspid valves close. S2 means the pulmonic and aortic valves close. Now, what actually controls and synchronizes all this blood flow through the heart? The heart wall is made up of three layers: the epicardium, or outer layer, the myocardium, or muscular middle layer, and the endocardium, or inner layer, closest to the lumen of the heart. Just like any muscle in the body, the heart muscle, or myocardium, contracts to help pump and propel blood between the different heart chambers. In the heart, the atria contract prior to the ventricles. The ventricles contract to propel the blood through their respective arteries, and the cycle repeats. This process is coordinated by the conduction system of the heart. Just like any other muscle in the body, the myocardium requires an electrical signal to initiate contraction. The conduction system of the heart is a coordinated collection of specialized cells that produce electrical activity to depolarize the cardiomyocytes. The pacemaking cells of this conduction system initiate the synchronized contractions of the heart. Under normal physiologic conditions, the electrical signal of the heart begins at the SA node in the right atrium. The SA node, or sinoatrial node, begins the electrical depolarization of cardiomyocytes that triggers atrial contraction. This signal propagates through the atria and then relays with the AV node, or atrioventricular node. The AV node is another center of pacemaking potential in the cell. Usually, the AV node fires in response to a signal from the SA node. Once the AV node depolarizes, the signal propagates through the bundle of His, the right and left bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers to coordinate a synchronized contraction of the ventricles. It is important to note that the intrinsic rate of depolarization of the AV node is slower than the SA node. The SA node initiates 60 to 100 beats per minute, while the AV node initiates 40 to 60 beats per minute. Therefore, if the SA node fails, the AV node can initiate ventricular contraction on its own, but the heart rate will be slower. We will talk about cardiac action potentials and ways of measuring this electrical activity in future videos. So that's our foundational intro to cardiology. Don't leave yet. Here's a quick rundown on the topics of this video. Take a screenshot for your notes. This is Medicine, where learning is always in style. I'm Alyssa, and be sure to like and subscribe.